The law of the thirds isn't a direct biblical phrase or doctrine, so you won't find a specific verse that lays it out. However, some people draw a conceptual parallel from biblical themes. For instance, in some spiritual or interpretive frameworks, people might loosely connect it to ideas like balance, proportionality, or the division of responsibilities. In a broader sense, biblical texts often emphasize order, like the Trinity, or divisions of offerings or tithes. But if someone is talking about a law of the thirds in a biblical context, it's probably more of a metaphor or modern interpretive concept rather than a scriptural law. If you got a specific teaching or context where you've heard this, feel free to share and we can dig deeper. One notable example of thirds in the Bible is in the book of Revelation. For instance, in Revelation 8:7-12, during the trumpet judgments, you see recurring fractions of thirds. For example, a third of the earth, a third of the trees, a third of the sea, and a third of the stars are affected. This third pattern symbolizes a partial judgment, serious but not total. In other places, Jesus speaks of rising on the third day, which reflects the significance of the number 3 in biblical structure. So while it isn't a universal law of thirds, thirds appear symbolically in prophetic or significant ways. If I were to extrapolate a law of thirds from biblical themes, I'd approach it as a pattern of meaningful division in scripture. Thirds often represent partial judgments or partial phases, never the whole but a significant portion. So, a law of thirds might reflect 3 key ideas. First, that God sometimes divides processes into phases: judgment, restoration, completion. Second, that there's a balance or a partial measure. Not everything is taken or given at once. Third, that resurrection and transformation often come in thirds. Think Christ's third day resurrection. In essence, I'd interpret it as a reminder that divine processes often unfold in significant structured parts, never random, but always purposeful in thirds or stages. In nature, we often see patterns of 3, for instance. The structure of the atom is made up of 3 fundamental particles: protons, neutrons, and electrons. In ecology, we see the rule of thirds in trophic levels: producers, consumers, and decomposers, each essential for ecosystems. In physics, we have the 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. In geometry, triangles with their 3 sides are the simplest stable shapes, forming the basis of stable structures. Even in astronomy, we have the Earth in the Goldilocks zone, where conditions are just right, often seen as a balance of thirds: not too hot, not too cold, and just right. Nature loves its triads. They often symbolize balance, stability, and completeness.
In nature. Not too cold and just right.
Nature loves its triads. They often symbolize balance, stability, and completeness.
I've heard a story of that. When Lucifer was kicked out of heaven, a third of heaven came with him. Is that true? Yes. That idea comes from an interpretation of a passage in Revelation 12, and that vision, a dragon, often associated, sweeps a third of the stars from the sky, which many interpret as fallen angels. While it's symbolic and not a direct historical account, it's where that 1/3 imagery comes from. So, it's a theological interpretation. Whether you take it literally or symbolically is often up to one's tradition. If you were to break out within the earth as far as good and evil, and people and how people are, how would thirds relate to that? If I were to frame human nature metaphorically in thirds, I might suggest something like this. 1/3 could represent the inclination towards good, compassion, empathy, and selflessness. Another third might represent the tendency towards selfishness or harm, what we might call evil or destructive choices. The final third might be the vast middle ground, ordinary, nuanced human motivations, shaped by circumstance, growth, and choice, of course. This isn't a scientific division. It's a reflective metaphor. It reminds us that people aren't purely good or evil. Rather, we all hold a potential mix. The thirds could encourage us to recognize that moral complexity is part of our human story, and that we have choices within that balance.
What am I missing?
What am I missing? What else should I be asking as far as this third's concepts to get a better understanding? Or what special other insights might you be able to give that I haven't thought of? One angle you might explore is why we humans gravitate toward patterns like thirds in storytelling, philosophy, and design. 3 is often a sweet spot. It gives us a beginning, middle, and end, a stable structure, like a triangle, or a way to balance contrast, such as thesis, antithesis, synthesis. You might ask how this concept can help you view decision-making or relationships, like balancing extremes with the mediating third. Or you could reflect on whether thirds show up in how you allocate time, energy, or resources. Maybe a third to work, a third to rest, a third to relationships. Ultimately, the insight is less about a rigid rule and more about seeing patterns that help you find balance, perspective, and meaningful structure in how you approach life. What does that third option offer you? Hello, my missing. The law of the thirds isn't a direct biblical phrase or doctrine. The law of the thirds. 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 When no fine balance. The law of the thirds. When no fine balance. When no fine balance. When no fine balance. So, you didn't mention anything about P. Or you didn't mention anything about the golden ratio. How does that play into thirds? You're right to bring those up. Pi and the golden ratio don't break neatly into thirds, but they're fascinating patterns of proportion. The golden ratio often divides things into 2 segments, about 1/3 and 2/3 in balance, creating a visually pleasing division. Pi, on the other hand, is an irrational constant tied to circles which, like thirds, show up in nature design, and even biblical references, like circles symbolize an eternity. So while thirds are neat divisions, these ratios remind us that nature's harmony isn't always exact. In fact, thirds can be a human-friendly simplification of proportion, while pi and the golden ratio show us that beauty and structure often transcend tidy fractions. In short, thirds help us simplify, but nature's ratios remind us there's more than one lens of balance. How does the Fibonacci sequence relate to thirds? The Fibonacci sequence, where each number is the sum of the 2 before it, doesn't align directly with thirds. But what's fascinating is that as you move through the sequence, the ratio between successive numbers approaches the golden ratio. That ratio often divides things into roughly a 1/3 to 2/3 balance. So while the Fibonacci pattern doesn't operate on thirds mathematically, it often yields proportions that we find aesthetically balanced, like dividing something into a smaller part and a larger part in essence. Fibonacci reminds us that nature's patterns can produce beautiful, harmonious divisions. Sometimes they echo thirds, but more often they reveal a deeper natural rhythm. This is KING-KAMBUF. KING-KAMBUF. This is KING-KAMBUF. 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 Lessons from the nation of Kambuff. Lessons from KING-KAMBUF.